Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This afternoon's reading is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 2, verse 43. Hitva kalavarein tete gangayayam dhyasharana sajya surupam jagrahe lagat pasha vartinam. Translation. Upon seeing the Vishnu Dutas, Jamil gave up his mere material body at Hardwar on the bank of the Ganges. He regained his original spiritual body, which was a body appropriate for an associate of the Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Janma karma chametivyam evam yo vati tapataha klaptadeham punarjanma naiti mamati sojana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. The result of perfection in Krishna consciousness is that after giving up one's material body, one is immediately transferred to the spiritual world in one's original spiritual body to become an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Some devotees go to Vaikuntha Loka and others go to Goloka Vrindavan to become associates of Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gauravanta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So good afternoon everybody, welcome to our program. I'd like to thank Shravan Krishna Prabhu for asking me or allowing me to give class this afternoon. I'd like the blessings of the devotees so that I can say something which is relevant or interesting for you this afternoon. So in this particular translation and purport, it's emphasized about someone who is giving up his material body and through practicing devotional service attains to the spiritual world. So yeah, you're in a bhakti now. You're not getting away with it so easily as that. So this particular instance in the Srimad Bhagavatam being really the encyclopedia of spiritual life. We have Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is like a preliminary study of spiritual life. It's the basics, knowing about the difference between the soul and the body, and many other things, different types of yoga. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam we have more descriptions about Krishna and his different incarnations and his relationships with his devotees. So here we're talking here about the story of Jamil, who at the time of death was lying on his deathbed, and suddenly he was approached by what's called the Yamadutas. The Yamadutas are the agents of death. It's described how he saw them, and they were very fearful. They had twisted faces, and they looked very serious, and they had like their hair was like standing on end. They're a bit like punk rockers, I think, or heavy metal rockers. You know about that. But he was very, very afraid, and he called out the name of his son, because he'd been associated with his son for so many years, his young son called Narayan, and he called out his name helplessly in that way, because he didn't know what was happening. These fearful beings will come to take him away. They will come to take the soul and the subtle body out from his gross body, and to take him away for punishment, actually. So to the hellish worlds. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have descriptions of the planetary systems in the material world. You have lower planets, you have middle planets, which is what the Earth is. It's in the middle planetary system. You have higher planets, heavenly planets like Indraloka, And these places, which is what in other religions they might call heaven, where the inhabitants there are all very beautiful. They have a very high standard of living and enjoyment. It's only enjoyment there. There's practically no suffering. There's no disease like that there. And there's they eat very wonderful food. They listen to incredible music. They drink what's called the somarasa, which is like intoxication, but it can give very, very long life. And they live for a very long time. A minimum 10,000 years is described in the higher planets. So it's very, very desirable for a lot of people to go there, to go to the heavenly planets. But it's also described, especially in the 5th canto, that there's hellish planets as well. Sometimes in people's religions, they preach on the basis of fire and brimstone, that if you don't follow this religion, then you're going to hell. Sometimes they say that to us just because we're not Christian or whatever. So the description of hellish planets in the Srimad Bhagavatam is very, it's actually quite, it's quite shocking really. But these places are factually described. They're not just a figment of somebody's imagination. So it's described as different punishments for people who are very, very sinful. People are considered sinful if they act against the religious laws, against the laws which are prescribed for human existence like that. So Ajamil was chanting out the name of his son. His son was only a little while away, and at the same time as he was chanting these names, these 4 beings suddenly arrived. They were dazzling. They were very beautiful. They had 4 arms, and they were carrying different types of weapons and different other objects in their hands. And the Yamadutas were very surprised to see these individuals coming there. And the Vishnu Dutas, they forbade the Yamadutas to take Ajamil away. They said, stop, don't do this. And the Yamadutas, they'd never seen such creatures before. And they said, well, who are you? Are you demigods? Are you sub-demigods? Are you the best of devotees? And why are you forbidding us to take Ajamil away? He's been sinful. And the Vishnu Dutas said, no, he's not guilty in this way. But why are you taking him to the hellish planets? You're asking us why we're forbidding you, but what's the reason for you taking him away? And they said, because he's been sinful all his life. And then the Yamadutas recounted his life, his early life, because they knew everything about him. They were the agents of Yamaraj. So the Yamadutas said, well, this Ajamil, early when he was a young man, he was actually very, very pious. He followed a Brahminical culture. He was very truthful. He was very peaceful. He was very kind to his parents. He carried out a lot of Vedic rituals. He chanted Vedic mantras. As I say, he was very, very kind to everybody, very respectful in that way. So he was very qualified when he was a young man. But what happened was that one time his father sent him to the forest to collect fruits and flowers and 2 types of grass, it's described. So obediently, Ajamil, he went to the forest and he collected these things. And he came back towards his house, but on the way he encountered what was described as a Sudra, a 4th-class man who was embracing and kissing a prostitute in the middle of the road, and they were both drunk. And that one, it's described that the girl's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress was loose, and she was was half naked. In that way. And in the purport of this verse, Srila Prabhupada says that I'm not exactly sure, I don't know if anybody knows exactly when this incident took place or what yuga is in. Do you know, Sri Krishna? The Srimad Bhagavatam is not sequential. It's not one incident after another. So some like for example, the story of King Ram goes back to the Treta Yuga. It goes back like up more than 1 million years ago, whereas the story of the Pandavas is 5,000 years ago. But it's not one after another. But Prabhupada says this was in the time where people it was a lot more pious. People lived a lot better life then. And he says in this particular time of this incident that it was uncommon to see this kind of behaviour in human society. He says that that's in contrast to modern times when it can be quite common to see that, where people take intoxication even in public. They're not dressed, they reveal themselves and that kind of thing. You can go into, sorry, Chaitanya?
It seems that it was Treta Yuga.
It was Treta Yuga, okay. Right, okay, thank you very much for that.
Because it said that was the time when Varnashram was really present.
Okay, yes. I'd like to talk to you about that later on, because Saraswati and I have been discussing this earlier. Where was I? Oh yes, we're in the Treta Yuga now. But we're not in the Treta Yuga now, we're in the Kali Yuga. And as I say, if you go into Newcastle on a Friday or a Saturday night, you can see similar type of behaviour. Like every year on New Year's Eve, we go down to the quayside, and there's all sorts of stuff going on down there. An intoxication. You can see girls half-dressed lying in the gutter, lying in the road, and things like that. It's actually very, very nasty to see. It's very degraded how people have become nowadays, just in the name of some kind of enjoyment, really. So anyway, Jamil, when he saw this activity, material desires, lusty desires, they arose in his heart. And although he had been trained to control the senses and the mind, he found that he couldn't do that. And he kept the image of this prostitute, this girl, in his mind when he went home and when he stayed at home, and all the time he was thinking of her. So what happened was that eventually he took although Ajamil was married, he took this girl into his house as a servant first of all, and later on he gave up the Brahminical culture altogether, and he forsake his young beautiful wife, and he kept the prostitute in the house. And it's described that he became a real debauchee, a real rogue and rascal, in that he squandered all his money that he got as an inheritance from his parents. He would earn money by illegal or illegal means. He would cheat people. He would gamble. He would steal. So many bad things that he did throughout his life, very sinful activities that he carried out for a very, very long time. It's also Prabhupada also described that. Well, that's also described in the verses that Ajamil had many, many children by this prostitute, like that, and even up to the time of his passing, it's described that he was 88 years old when he was on his deathbed. But still, even then, he had a young son, like that. So Prabhupada comments on that. He said that this is actually abominable for someone who's elderly like that, at that age, to still have children. In other words, to still be engaged in sex life. Because Prabhupada emphasizes that human life is meant for self-realization. It's not meant for unlimited material enjoyment. Therefore, in the Varnashram system, a man, especially, he's a brahmachari. He has a celibate life when he's young, up until the age of 25, and then he can get married. And then after that, he spends 25 years in married life. And then at 50, he would leave home with his wife and they would travel to places of pilgrimage to become more spiritually advanced. And then at the age of 75, he would leave home and become a sannyas. He would leave his wife in the care of an older son, and he would travel and preach. He should be spiritually advanced, then he should be spiritually realized, so that he can travel around and give his wisdom to others like that. But here we see the example of Ajamil that he didn't do that. He carried on in material life right up until what we call the bitter end. Even nowadays, you can see like some rock stars like Rod Stewart and Mick Jagger. They have loads of children, and I think even when they're in their late 70s, they're still having children at that age. So again, in Kali Yuga, we don't really see much of an example of people who are very well known in society, setting an example in that regard. In the Bhagavad Gita, of course, it's stated in the Bhagavad Atato Brahma Jigyasya that in the human form of life, now is the time to inquire about Brahman, to inquire about spirituality. Because in animal society, they can also eat, sleep, mate and defend. They can do those things, but they can't inquire about the soul. They can't inquire about the material world. They can't inquire about God or a relationship with God. But we can do that in the human form of life. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manushana Sahasreshu, that out of thousands of men, one may strive for perfection. Sri Panchatantraki. One may strive for perfection, and out of those striving for perfection, hardly one knows me in truth, like that. So you could practically say, even where we're living here in Newcastle, it's not thousands, it's tens out of tens of thousands of people. How many people are actually thinking about who they are, or thinking about spirituality? Very, very few people actually. You can see in human society, everybody is caught up in some type of material activities and material aspirations in that way. So, as I say, among so many people who might be practicing spirituality, Krishna had stated here that hardly one knows him in truth, because he can only be known by devotional service. He says that, it's stated that in the 11th chapter, that I can only be known by devotional service. I can only be seen by me. You can only see me by practicing devotional service and understand exactly who I am. So very, very few people. There's so many different types of yoga. There's so many different types of philosophies around in the world. But very, very few people will actually commit themselves to practicing Bhakti yoga or to render devotional service to the Lord, because it means giving up everything else. It means being selfless. That actually, very often in other disciplines, people practice it, but they want something back from it. Whereas in Krishna consciousness, our only aspiration is to please Krishna. So, Ajahn was very affectionate to his young son. He was with him so much of the time. He was, whenever he would eat, he'd call his son to eat. Whenever he wanted to go for a walk, he'd call his son. So all the time he was calling out the name of his son Narayan throughout his time there. And at the time of death, as we stated, that he cried out the name of Narayan, his son's name, in helplessness. So the Vishnudutas were saying that Ajamil is not liable for punishment because he chanted the holy names of the Lord. Well, the Yamadutas, they countered. They said he wasn't chanting the name of his Lord, he was chanting the name of his son. He says he never performed any atonement for his sins. Generally, if people know that in the Vedic society, if they've committed activities which are against the principles of the Vedas, they would carry out some kind of atonement, which would also be laid down. But the Yamaduta said that he didn't do that. You know, he was sinful his whole life. But he never carried out any atonement, therefore he's punishable. But the Vishnu Dutas were saying no. He chanted the holy names of the Lord, so he's not punishable. So who's right? The Vishnu Dutas or Yamadutas? The Gurj, what do you think? You think the Vishnu Dutas? Anybody else?
In one sense, they're both correct.
Yeah, in one sense they are, because one of them, it's about morality, isn't it? It's about leading a good life according to Vedic prescriptions. But on the other side of the coin, well, I wouldn't say the other side of the coin, but the Vishnu Dutas were saying that devotional service to the Lord is the highest religious principle, and that throughout his life, Ajamil had been chanting the name of the Lord. Prabhupada said that actually, because of Ajamil's previous piety, when he was a young Brahmin, although he went off the rails, Krishna gave him the intelligence to name one of his children Narayan. So therefore he was able to chant the holy names, even unknowingly. This is called a gyata sakriti. That's someone who is performing a devotional service unknowingly. It's a fact that Ajamil wasn't chanting the holy name out of sadhana. He was chanting because it was just the name of his son. So so the Vishnu Dutas, they were saying that because he'd been chanting the holy names of the Lord, that actually that particular activity, it evokes remembrance of the Lord's form, his attributes, his pastimes, his paraphernalia, his abode. All that can come back into play when you chant the holy names. So therefore the Vishnu Dutas, they said that he is not to be punished, and that they are to release him in that way. So the Yamadutas, they did release him. So did Ajamil go back to Godhead then? Back to Godhead?
As far as I know, at that point when they came for him, he didn't leave his body, but that stopped him. But then he went to Hardware, I think, and he carried on performing devotional service.
That was in the verse that I actually recounted here. Yeah, I brought it forward to that point. So yeah, he got protection from the Lord in that sense from the Yamadutas, from being sent to hell. But he still had to perfect his life. So as you were saying, Chaitanya, he went to Hardwar, and there he was very repentant of his previous life in sinful life. So he gave up. He gave up the prostitute. He gave up his family, and he went to Hardwar, and he practiced devotional service in that way. And then what happened was that the Vishnu Dutas, who he had seen before, they reappeared in a spiritual aeroplane, and in his spiritual body, Ajamil, he went back to Godhead in that way. So just to go back a little bit over the story about Ajamil, when he saw the Sudra and the prostitute, it said that at the time Ajamil could not control his mind, Prabhupada says there that he couldn't control his mind because he wasn't advanced enough in spirituality. He was pious, but he wasn't a pure devotee. So therefore, unfortunately, he couldn't control his mind. This is in contrast, say, for example, of Haridas Thakur in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where this rogue Ramachandra Khan, he sends his prostitute because he doesn't like it that Haridas Thakur has got some fame amongst people as being a great devotee. So he sends his prostitute to try to tempt Haridas Thakur, and over a period of nights she tries to allure him. But in the end, Haridas Thakur, he converts her to Krishna consciousness in that way. So Prabhupada says in that instant, the reason why that Haridas Thakur wasn't allured is because he had a higher taste, that he wasn't at all interested in material enjoyment in that sense. He loved, we all know he loved chanting the holy name, 300,000 names a day. I think some devotees have tried this. I haven't tried it. What is it, 198 rounds, isn't it?
192.
Okay, thank you. 192 rounds a day, yes. Okay, so yeah. But yeah, he didn't have any taste for material enjoyment. He only wanted to chant the holy names and think about Krishna. Krishna also talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya Vinivartante Narahara Devina, Rasava Jambasojasja Paramjishta Nivartante. Krishna says that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, but he may restrict the mind and the senses, but the taste for sense objects remain. But ceasing engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So this is one of the essence of Krishna consciousness, that although we practice quite strict vows, it's not really in one sense done by force or simply by determination. It's done because we get a higher taste in life. Just like we were on the street yesterday, and we were singing and dancing with just simple instruments, and it was enjoyable, yeah? I think so, yeah. Other people are striving so much, they're buying this food and this, that and the other, and, they're listening to music and that, but, you can see they're always trying to find, different ways of enjoyment, but, with a simple Harinam, you can feel satisfied and happy by that. So that's one point, that if Ajama had been more advanced, he would have been able to control his senses. But then, of course, he associates with a prostitute, and this is another point about the story, is association. Whoever you associate with, whoever your friends are, in that sense, you're going to assimilate a similar type of consciousness like that. If you associate with people who are drunks, you'll probably likely be addicted to drinking, and so on and so forth like that. So that's why we have places like this here in cities, is that people can come here and associate with like-minded people. You could come and find out what Krishna consciousness is, and understand it, and take it up. And if you're actually serious about practicing it, then you can associate with spiritually minded people in that way. So really, you could say that Ajamil, he got Kripa Siddhi. This is called perfection by mercy. He mainly got Krishna's mercy here. There are different types of perfection. One of them is called Nitya Siddhi, which means those persons who are eternally perfect, like the residents of the spiritual world, for example. They're not conditioned to material enjoyment. They're all pure devotees, and they don't come down to the material world. Some of them do, like for example, the associates of Lord Chaitanya, like the Goswamis. We know that they are residents of the spiritual world who come down to preach. They come down to try to attract people back to Godhead, and they're Nitya Siddha. They're perfect, they're eternally perfect. And then there's also sadhana siddhi. Those persons who gain perfection by practicing the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness or of bhakti yoga, and they gradually reach the point where they become perfect. Can anybody tell me any examples in the scriptures of people who are sadhana siddhi, who have gained perfection by practicing sadhana? Dhruva, yeah, that's a good one. That's what I got there. Yes, Dhruva Maharaj, yeah, he went to the forest and he met Narada Muni, and Narada Muni told him how to practice sadhana bhakti, and but because of his serious practice, eventually he was actually to visualize the form of Vishnu. Anybody else? Prahlad Maharaj. Do you think that's true? Prahlad, he practiced sadhana to become perfect?
The last thing is the previous achieved 94%.
He was very advanced even when he came out from the womb, wasn't he? He heard in the womb. I think that was like that. One other one I was thinking of was Narada Muni. We know that he got a lot of mercy through the association of these Bhaktivedantas when they stayed in his house during the rainy season. But when his mother passed away, he was only very, very young. It's stated that he travelled to the north, and then he practiced sadhana bhakti, and eventually he visualised Vishnu in that way. So he's another example. But So Ajama was very, very, very fortunate that he got Krishna's mercy in terms of his perfection. And so, as I said before, Krishna gave him the intelligence to chant the name of Narayan by giving him that name Narayan as is to his son. Prabhupada also states there that in India, I don't know whether it's still the custom, but it was a custom that parents would give their children names of Krishna or names of Krishna's associates or something like that, so that when you're calling the names, then you're making an advancement, so I mean. It does. In one sense, it doesn't matter where you hear the name. I mean, some people also they may be chanting. They may not be devotees, but they may be chanting Ram, Ram, Ram all the time. I know in Northern Ireland, I don't know if it's still there, but there was a fruit and vegetable shop called Harry Bowles, and people would say that, and they would make some kind of advancement by that. My father's name was Harry. So my mother probably made it. My mother also, sometimes she chanted the Hare Krishna mantra as well. If you like in that way, through Agyata Sukriti, unknown devotional service, the names of Krishna are very powerful in that way. Krishna, he accepted that as devotional service. Krishna, he sees the good. Krishna actually wants us back to Godhead more than we want to go, practically speaking. So he accepts any small. He sees the positive side. So here he saw the positive side of Ajama's chanting. Although he was chanting really the name of his son, it was the name of the Lord. So therefore he took that as devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Neha Brikamanasa Ste Pratyavayana Vijate Swalpamashyad Brahmasatrayate Mahatobhaya. That in this endeavour there's no loss or diminution, and little advancement on this path can save one from the most dangerous type of fear. So someone may think, well, I might take up spiritual life, but I may give it up. But it's not. Nothing is lost in that way. And in the purport of that particular verse, Prabhupada mentions the incident of Ajamil, how he said that Jamal actually, he only put in 1%, practically speaking, of endeavour, and he got 100% in the end result. So that Krishna actually was very merciful, and again he saw the positive side of it. Another example of that is in the Krishna book when we hear the story of Putana. Putana was a nasty witch who enjoyed killing children. She was an incredible demon, and Kamsa sent her to kill Krishna, and she smelled poison on her breast, as we know, and Krishna sucked the breast, but he sucked her life out and killed her. But Krishna thought, well, hold on a minute, although she's a demon, she's acting like my mother. So he actually enabled her to go back to Godhead, to act as his mother in that way. So he saw the positive side of it. Although her intentions weren't devotional, he took it like that she actually wanted to be his mother. Ajama was saved by chanting the holy name. Again, Ajama he made no preparations for that. Again, one important part of this particular story is about the time of death. What's going to happen at the time of death? Are we preparing for it? Prabhupada says most people think that there's nothing after this life. They think that when you come to the time of death, then everything is finished. But in Krishna consciousness, we know that there's reincarnation. The soul goes on. The soul is existed before this body, and it's going to exist after this body. Therefore, one has to consider what's going to be our destination in that sense. Although because someone may say, well, I'll practice spiritual life just before I die or something like that. But actually, you have to, in order to think of Krishna at the time of death, in order to free ourselves, we have to be practicing and thinking about Krishna for so many years before that. It's an endeavour, as he says in the Gita, in this endeavour. There's an endeavour to practice bhakti yoga and to think of Krishna, so that at the time of death we'll remember Krishna and we'll go back to Godhead. Because whatever we're thinking of at the time of death, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, whatever state you're thinking of at the time of death, that state you will attain without fail. We have to be prepared for that instant. When one is younger, perhaps one can consider that it's not so essential that you think like that. Although we never know when death is going to come like that. One of our congregational members years ago, his daughter was killed in an accident at the age of 12. So we never know. I mean, we're not prophets of doom. Perhaps most of us have got the expectation of a long life, but you never know. Especially in today's society, where there's so many strange things going on. Krishna consciousness is a facility to prepare for this, and also to free us from material suffering in general. This world is designed for suffering. The different types of suffering you can get: adhyatmic, adibhautic, adidaivic. That you get suffering from your own body and mind, you get suffering from other living entities, and you get suffering from the demigods, which is from the weather and natural catastrophes. So we can see so many of those in recent times, that these things are always there. But if we chant the holy names, then we can free ourselves from these. And again, in this section of the Bhagavatam, this is the important point about chanting the holy names. This is where we get some of our authority from. Someone might say, well, you say chanting, but where is it? Where is it described? It's in the Bhagavad Gita. It's also here about the efficacy of chanting the holy names. There's lots of benefits of chanting. Anybody like to give some thoughts about the benefits of chanting the holy names? Yes, sir.
When you chant the holy name, it's don't different from Krishna, so you're associating with Krishna directly in a sense.
Okay.
It's all purified us and long term.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any thoughts about that? Yes, yeah.
Peaceful mind.
Peaceful mind, yes, it brings peace. Nikunj, yes? Sorry? Frees you from anxiety, yes. Because in the spiritual world it's called Vaikuntha. It means a place where there's no anxiety. Here there's always anxiety about things. We don't know what's going to happen in our lives, so we could be worried very often. But Krishna consciousness, it can give us some perspective on life. The ups and downs. Just like in the second chapter, Matras Pashas de Kuntaya, Krishna was saying that there's happiness and distress. It comes and goes like summer and winter seasons. So if you have that perspective, it means it's much easier to lead your life. The things are still going to be there, perhaps, but it's how you deal with them as well. Very often materialistic people, they're elated when something nice happens to them, and they're depressed when they get something which bad happens, you could say like that. Some adversity, that's the word I was looking for. Some adversity. Whereas in Krishna consciousness we can sometimes see these things with an equal mind. Anything else? Any other points? Yes, Brenda?
Yeah. Dhananjaya Prabhu, you just mentioned about Ajamir, due to the association of that prostitute, he fell down and he was having all sinful activities. But I'm thinking when we are chanting it helps us to get bad association as well.
Yes, it does, yes. Definitely. In the beginning, when we take up Krishna consciousness, the rules and regulations, they may seem a little difficult to come to terms with or to follow. But when we chant, because it purifies the consciousness and it gives us the intelligence to understand that a lot of these activities, which we refrain from, that they're actually not very nice, and therefore it can be easier anyway to give these things up or to consider them not very important in our lives. And thank you. Yeah. Any other points? Anybody like to make any questions or anything? Any comments? Dr. Satsena, yes.
In current Mahakumbh, which comes every 144 years, so there were glimpses all over the global television. There was a sadhu, possibly they couldn't trace his name, maybe Hari Singh.
Okay.
So he's relying on the reservoir.
Yeah.
He can't be 144 years, but his wish is to half the 144 years, that's about 72 years to survive. He doesn't eat.
Okay.
On that.
So he was lying on a bed of nails, is that what you're
He
saying?
was put on to river Saraswati.
Okay, yeah.
So people, they left him on the good end.
Right.
And hardly sleep. You could see all the time. Whenever something is Hari Singh, that's all he speaks. And people there, most of the time, they shift him to the Haridwar,
I see.
where I have been few years ago.
This is what we were talking about here about Kandahar. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
you could see it looks really funny. People from all over the world. The population of England, France, Germany is there plus.
All right.
But once they see how could you, what is Hari Singh?
Okay.
Hari Singh.
All right. Lovely. Thank you. Anybody else got anything?
Noticeable.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I guess it's to conclude it naturally awakens our original consciousness. So
Yes.
that's a bitter. So I guess that's where we try to fail to realize ourselves as servants. So I guess chanting makes that realization.
Yes, it's not. Prabhupada says it's not an artificial imposition on the mind. That it's something that naturally evokes our dormant love of Krishna. Of course, we have to be serious about it and concentrate when we're chanting, which is, again, it can be a challenge as well in that sense. But when we endeavour with these things with determination and patience, we get the results. And so, as you say, like you were saying, freedom from anxiety, peacefulness. The more we hear about Krishna, the more we chant, the more affection we can have for Krishna, and therefore the more steady and more determined we become in performing devotional service. In the material environment, we don't want to serve really. We serve with some ulterior motive. But in Krishna consciousness, there isn't that. I was saying earlier on that our practice means that we render service without any desire for a reward or anything like that. Although we can expect Krishna's mercy, but that can come in a lot of different ways as well. But thank you. So if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to finish.
I have one.
Sorry, yes, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
So you did mention about Saranavati, about
Yes.
Maharaj and Narada.
Mm.
But if we compare their pastimes with Ajamila,
Yeah.
like though the Ajamila's pastime highlights about how Yamadutas come and
Mm.
the glories of the word Narayana. But if you just think about it, like Durga Maharaja had to do so much of penance, and then he got the darshan of Krishna or Vishnu. So why is that difference? When you are looking at Narada Muni, he had to do that such a
Because it's a good question, but it's because we're different individuals and we've had different history in our lives, and only Krishna knows that. So yeah, you could say, well, how come he got the mercy and Narada Muni had to spend years and years meditating or something like that? But Krishna sees the endeavour. He sees the consciousness. That's what he sees, and he knows that in one sense, Ajamila was unfortunate that he was actually allured by the prostitute, although he had obviously performed some sadhana and pious activities prior to that. But it's not necessarily that Krishna, he compares one person with another like that. I think there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that he doesn't assume anybody's pious activities in one sense. So he wants to see somebody's attitude like that, It's a bit like that story of the Brahmin and the prostitute, the Brahmin was carrying out all the proper rituals and activities of a Brahmin, but his mind was thinking of the prostitute, whereas the prostitute was the opposite. She was carrying out some sinful activity, but she was thinking, I'd really like to be like the Brahmin. So again, Krishna sees the consciousness there. It's not always exactly the way that we might see things. It's exactly the same as the Yamadutas. They see things in black and white. Well, he's not carrying out the Vedic principles, therefore he's sinful, like that. But they couldn't see the spiritual aspect of it, which again is not always completely predictable from that point of view. Thank you.
So Krishna's mercy is the kind of the overriding factor all the time.
Yeah. There's that story where that rat got the mercy. You remember that story? The rat? He got the mercy. But somehow or other he lit the flame on the altar or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I shouldn't know that, but he went back to God. I think he died because of that. Because but he lit the flame, and so it was a service to the deity. So he went back to God. There's also when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan one time. The devotees noticed there was this lady who was carrying water from the well every day to the temple. And Prabhupada says, for this service she's going back to Godhead. Just a simple woman just carrying water on her head every day. But it was what was in the heart that Krishna sees. So it's an important point. Yeah. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and I'm going to go on to the next part of the program now for the arting. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai.
Dhananjaya Dāsa.
Jai.